Thank you so much for coming. We have a great event tonight. I'm going to read through these bios really quickly, but you guys are totally in for an awesome, amazing treat. The name of the event, Audio Compression, Audio Entrepreneurs with Dave Durr and Dave Amos, moderated by Roey Shamir. And I'm going to start, let me see, I'm going to read this bio off here so you guys can check this out. Dave Durr, the founder and head designer at Empirical Labs, Inc., started his electronics career at a biomedical company after spending well over a decade as a touring musician. Although Dave was a music composition major in college, he was ingrained with a deep interest in science and engineering from an early age by his family, including two older brother engineers. After 1 year as a technician, Dave was offered an engineering position at the groundbreaking digital audio company Eventide in New Jersey. There, Dave was exposed to state-of-the-art engineering and the modern world of digital signal processing, working as part of the core team for the award-winning H3000, H3500, and DSP 4000 Ultra Harmonizers. While enjoying the engineering work at Eventide, Dave opened a recording studio where he often tested some of Eventide's Ultra Harmonizers. A corporation, Empirical Labs, was created, under which the studio business was operated. With his new knowledge and passion for music, electrical engineering, and audio design, Dave left Eventide and began designing his own products. In parallel with doing recording sessions, Dave designed his first product, the Distortion. And after 2 years of testing and revising, the product was officially released in 1996, the first Empirical Labs product. Now, 24 years later and 32,000 distressors later, my goodness, it is considered a modern classic, having received numerous awards, including the induction into the Tech Hall of Fame. With a full line of analog processors, including the Distressor, Fatso, Little Freak, Mikey, and two 500 series modules, Empirical Labs bravely branched out into the world of digital audio in 2010, collaborating with Universal Audio on an emulation of the Empirical's Fatso Junior hardware, one of the first analog tape simulators. Empirical Labs now has several plugins, including its own audio plugin, the Arouser, along with Universal Audio's emulation of the famous Distressor. After nearly 25 years of operation, Empirical Labs is a household name in recording studios around the globe and is excited about new products, both hardware and software, coming in 2020. Welcome, Dave Durr, to the house. Next up, Dave Amos is an electrical engineer. Amos. Oh, I'm sorry, Dave. Why do I always pronounce your name that way? Sorry. Dave Amos is an electrical engineer, inventor, session musician, recording engineer, and record producer with over 75 records to his credit. Advocating digital models for musical instrument synthesis since the 1970s, Dave co-founded Voce Inc. in 1988, which employed digital models to create organ and electric piano sounds. Building upon the modeling experience from Voce Inc., Dave co-founded Bomb Factory Digital in 1999. Bomb Factory was responsible for creating model-based plugins which are still in use today. In 2006, Dave co-founded Animod. Animod produced analog studio gear based on the modeling methodology Dave created over the previous decades. Animod's products included the ATS-1 tape simulator, Fairchild 660, and 670 compressors. Dave is listed as the inventor on 3 patents ranging from power conversion to a mathematical process for controlling distortion. He is currently involved in advancing the practical implementation of physical science using machine learning. Welcome, Dave. Last up, our moderator for the evening, Roey Shamir, musician, RIAA, multi-platinum mix and recording engineer, audio entrepreneur, consultant, owner of INFX Productions, Inc., partner in Area 51 NYC LLC, as well as proceptualist at Reflector Audio USA, and a mix master. Roey Shamir. All right, I'm going to hand this over to you gentlemen, and here we go.
All right, gentlemen, come on up. have a place in particular you want us to sit? Any place you feel comfortable?
Have you guys seen Davey? They're both here. Sorry, I just had to play one of my mixes from the 80s. Okay, so we're not going to be doing a heavy technical explanation of compression as far as I'm concerned tonight.
We're not?
But But we are going to discuss compression. We are going to discuss compression. And also the fact that both of these guys, these brainiacs, are entrepreneurs, audio entrepreneurs, and they have experience in that world as well. So I'm going to try to ask some questions, and then we're going to also hopefully have enough time to open up for some questions and answers. So you guys should start thinking about what you might want to ask. Okay, so we'll figure out who's going to answer this first once I get it out of my mouth. So you're both musicians and avid music listeners, and so not yet with any focus on compression, but more as a little background information about you both. Please tell us a few of your favorite songs or albums. Who wants to start?
You go first. Yeah,
Let's get you on the mic a little bit, just so in case
I have a huge range of listening stuff, and of course, I grew up with a lot of the classic stuff, the 70s, 80s, 90s. But just yesterday, I was listening to lots of stuff on the radio, artists that probably none of you have even heard of. So my tastes are all over the place. And then in college, I was actually a classical music major, so I love classics also. And one of my professors was also a jazz musician, so I fell in love with that. Also, my brothers listened to Dave Brubeck and Coltrane and all kinds of stuff, Miles Davis. So I'm all over the place.
So a diverse range.
Yeah. And I feel like it's part of my job also to kind of keep in touch with what's out there right now, selling. And as you know, it's always the youngest folks who determine what is selling, almost invariably. We hardly even stream anything and pay for it. And so I've tried to keep in touch with, again, everything from hip hop to just straight up pop. Listen to Korean pop bands a lot in the last week. And it's I'm fascinated by all forms of music, but I tend to listen, when I'm listening to pop music, a lot of times I'm not really listening for a song, especially, nowadays a lot of it is about production and maybe some rhyming, but I do like to keep in touch with, what the sounds are going through right now. So that's why I try to listen to a little bit of everything still.
Cool. And same question for you, Dave. Amels?
Well, as of 7 p.m. tonight, Odyssey and Oracle, the Zombies.
Yeah.
That's it.
Is that because it came out this evening?
No, I just like it.
That's what's
You know,
happening at the
I
moment.
oscillate between that and, I don't know, something else. Yeah, but that's probably my all-time favorite.
You have some jazz chops. You listen to
I like,
jazz.
Jimmy Smith. I like straight-ahead jazz more than, I don't get, I don't. No, I like the originators of fusion, partially because he's a friend of mine, but also I really like the stuff, and that's Brian Oliver. But other than that, I don't know.
What about classical?
Yeah, Bach.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But because I like the harmonic progressions, right? So I like Brian Wilson's writing because it's all about, I don't like Paul McCartney so much because it's all about the melody, and I like the harmonic progression. That's me. That's about it.
Cool. And just so we also in further understanding background about you guys, your main instrument, Dave Amels, is
Hammond organ.
okay. And for Mr. Dirk,
Keyboards, and I play guitar too for years.
guitars. I always thought that you were more into guitar than keyboard, but then again, what do I know?
Yeah, when I played in a band, it was mainly guitar.
Cool.
But you know, in college, they didn't even have, at the time I went, a guitar major. So I was keyboard.
I can relate. As a music and art graduate, they did not treat guitar as an instrument. Although I could play guitar in the jazz band, which I did, I had to pick up cello because that was not considered a problem, and guitar was not considered a problem. I enjoyed it then, but I don't play it anymore. So yeah, I'm just trying to give everybody a little bit of understanding of where these guys came up with their voodoo magic that they produced with their amazing products. So in that vein, continuing, for Mr. Amels, let's start with you. What was the first compressor you ever experienced and or used?
Oh, it's funny. So when I started making records in the early 80s, I never used compression. If I needed to level something out, I'd use a reverb to do it.
Sustain.
Yeah, just to like, kind of fill in those gaps. And that worked great. But, I started running into problematic. See, we were only trying to solve problems with compression. We weren't trying to create an effect with it. So, God, it was up at, and Mike was there. Mike Marcucci was my assistant on a lot of that stuff. That was at Dubway on 38th Street.
I remember that name.
And yeah, I actually had keys to that place at one point. So we were making so many records there. But they had an ore band compressor. So it was an ore band compressor was the first compressor that I used. And it was just to solve some problematic. Now we were working on 8-track, so you'd be sharing a track with other stuff and the levels wouldn't be quite right. So it was just to try to balance levels. And that's all we were trying to do back then.
Some tricks with the threshold, so that it would kick in
Yeah,
on one
yeah,
instrument on that
basically,
track and then not
yeah.
kick in on the other.
Yeah, and not be apparent.
Right,
Yeah, we were always trying to have the compressor be out of the way of the
right.
sound.
Unlike how compression has evolved into today's
Well,
world.
because it's a Band-Aid now to try to fix, the bad audio that we have. So,
I have some future questions that will touch on that, on
Yeah.
those subjects, but it's an interesting to get your perspective on these things, both
Yeah.
as musicians and as designers. And for you, Dave, what was the first compressor, Mr. Durr, Dave Durr, what was the first compressor you experienced and or used?
I was in a band at the time, and
Working with another engineer or a producer? Or
yeah,
just
I
being a
wasn't
band?
into engineering at all. I was just into playing and picking up girls. But
That
the
hasn't changed.
first time, what's that?
That hasn't changed.
No, it
No, he's well behaved.
Yes,
And married. And
But-
married.
I do remember we were recording at a couple studios, KGEM, which was a pretty big studio in the Philadelphia area, and Studio 4. And I remember when we were listening to the drums, and I remember the engineer went and flicked something on. I said, "What was that?" And it was a Complex, as it ended up. And I also remember we had a bass player that some notes were popping out and stuff on, and it was just a little too clean. And I remember engineer putting 1176 on that, and I was like, "Oh, that's very neat." But honestly, it wasn't really until I got my own studio, during the Eventide days that I actually started getting fascinated by it. So, but then I became really fascinated by it.
So at that point, you dove into various compressors as an owner of the studio. You bought yourself different ones, or you went and found out which ones you liked and tried them out and experimented with it.
I didn't find out what I liked until John Patterson. John Patterson showed me what I should like. I had a friend who moved down from, I knew of the classics, the LA2As, 1176s, Fairchild, but I really didn't get to use them in my studio until later on, when John Patterson said, "Get an 1176," and I said, "Okay." And at that time, they weren't actually being built. I think there was a lapse in UA for a few years, late 80s.
Yeah.
But I ended up getting 2 used ones from a guy in Texas. I think I got them both for $800, $400 each. They were original blackface, so I was lucky. And they did fundamentally change the sound of my studio. I had a bunch of other compressors too that were all, more deep stuff. I don't want to mention names so much, releases, but it was a.
Somebody's running alignment tones check here.
I know
That's
that's
not 1K.
No, that's about 3K.
It's 2,640.
That sounds
Been
right.
going on all-
It's in the room.
Can you fix that, please, Chuck?
It's been ongoing for about 90 minutes, so we're starting to phase it out.
It's interfering with my tinnitus.
Double ring,
No,
phase reversal.
But yeah, so I really learned along the way, and towards the end of my Eventide years was when I started realizing that it could fundamentally make something bad sounding, like a drum room might turn into like a useful sound.
Incredible sound.
Yeah. So it was a
Cool.
slow awakening.
Cool. Well, late to the party, but hell of an accomplishment. Both of you actually have amazing products that have been in the business and in the sound equation for probably 20 years.
Yeah, well, Dave.
You're 40.
Yeah. Well,
Dave wrote some of the very first compressor plugins out
Yes.
there.
Well, I think DigiDesign had some defective ones before that.
Right. The first useful ones.
Yeah, Dave.
And what's interesting is it's still in use today. It's not like it's
Yeah.
vintage or old software. It's still on
Well,
Factory
it's-
76. I always hesitated to talk about it on the plane, but it's a scary name with everything that happened in 9/11. But
We called it an 1176, but DigiDesign was a little worried about
yes,
pissing off UA, so they changed it
Right.
to be.
Now, I bet
Yes.
were they actually making that when you released that? Because that might
They-
have been the gap years, like 88, 89.
Yeah, no, they weren't making anything when we started, and we started making that with the name, and then they said, hey, we have the copyright on that name, and we said, you're not making anything, we are, so
Yeah.
get lost basically, and they went away. So.
jumping ahead on some questions been asked later, but all good. So moving along to my next question. For me personally, multiband dynamics are my favorite. I'm just answering the question before I ask it. What's your favorite compression use, and how do you apply it, or if you could pick one way you like to use a compressor, or that you think is a great way to apply a compressor, what would that be?
Well, in what context do you mean? Tracking?
Again, if you're mastering or mixing, or if you're tracking, pick one or two things that really stand out to you as something that you really kind of enjoy or like about
Well,
compression.
I'm going to pick for mastering, I think, now that we could do non-causal limiting. In other words, limiting where you're infinite look ahead and you know what's going on, and it's not a real-time thing, but you can really get things to line up nicely without hearing any artifacts, and intelligent peak limiting and stuff. Well, peak limiting is really, that's a whole another subject, but that's really more important for this weird digital domain we're in these days. But I think that's the most important thing. We really can't get rid of this.
I think it's in the fluorescent lighting.
Yeah, I think
because
so too.
Can we
We
turn
did
off
have
the
the
lights? Just leave those lights on or something. Is it really? No, they're not down that frequency.
It could be this.
No, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's all around the
It's in the
room.
whole building?
No, it's in this room.
Yeah, but I think the direction is coming from over there.
Which speaker system?
I just feel like I'm talking over this. I doubt that's going to do it, right?
Well, it depends if it's a real rheostat. or not.
Yeah, but they don't run it in audio range, do they?
It's a little less, maybe.
Oh,
No, it's no better.
Hello.
that's crazy.
I'm not as dumb as I look.
Try these up here.
Turn them all off, yeah. That's like
These long bars.
As long as our
I don't want
capture crew is happy.
Yeah, you know, some effect.
Well, yeah, but up here we got.
We're okay.
like with these.
I think we're all right.
These are okay.
I don't notice much difference actually.
I don't know.
This is-
I don't know what's going on. Anyway, I'm sorry, what was
It
the
did go away.
question?
It did go away when they got
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
And thankfully, most of us can hear it. So, for your answer, it was the modern methods in mastering of non-coloration and
Right,
no
non-coloration,
artifact,
just getting out of the way of the audio and.
and just helping
Yeah.
get rid of
Yeah,
the dynamic
just
range
solving-
and making
solving-
it only have like 2 dB of dynamic range or half a dB
I
of
don't think
dynamic.
he's into that.
No, I'm not
No.
saying he's into that, but that is
No, I
the
am,
tool
I
that
feel-
he's
well,
referring
yeah,
to.
I'm not into.
You wouldn't apply it that way, but that's the
No,
tool
but
that you're referring to.
You could, but at that point, it does become apparent when you start doing that. But I like when it's out of the way of the audio and it's just like, you know, it's just fixing the problem. I've always been about fixing the problems more than,
Cool.
you know, an effect.
Just shot a hole in one of my questions later, but it's okay. We've answered it. Very cool. And I only asked for one or two because, of course, there's a million different things we can do with compressors, expanders, and limiters, any kind of dynamic control. We're focused on compression, but of course, we're talking about the whole picture. And for Mr. Durr, what would be your answer to that question? If you had a choice for how to apply a compressor or to use compression, what would be that application and how would you use it?
It really depends. I like Dave's answer that it can solve some problems. There's certain instruments which always pop out, and the front edge sometimes is, a problem. Everything from keyboards to guitars. But I also, I have to say that when I do testing, a lot of times I'm not into being subtle at all.
Well, yeah.
It's like,
Sure, yeah, for testing.
and yes, if usually if something can sound good with a lot of compression, it can sound good with less. But obviously vocals make things sit, in a mix. Don't lose syllables. Also be able to grab the front edge of fricatives, K's and T's and stuff like that. Very important. Drums. Drums, I think, is one place where you go beyond just fixing stuff for me.
Well, it depends how you record the drums. I mean, in the last 10 years, I've been working at Daptone, and it's just one microphone. And we don't compress it, it just sounds right, because the room sounds right. And it's an RCA 77 over the drummer's shoulder, and it's perfect. You don't have to do anything.
Those
But
little
if
ribbons.
you're multi-miking, yeah, exactly. If you're multi-miking, then you're in a whole world of hurt. Or you can be, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually looked at not probably been 8 or 9 years ago now, but a RCA 77.
Yeah.
And those ribbons do a little compression all by themselves.
Well, yeah,
That's why
they
they're
kind of do, but
nice
they
and
don't.
beefy.
Well, what happens is they're not like a condenser mic where they have all those sharp little peaks up top,
Yeah.
which you excite every time you put a transient in there, and that's like they're actually a little more transparent as far as that goes. They're not adding these very narrow resonant peaks and that's from tensioning the capsule on a electret mic or a condenser mic. So that's a problem. So they don't have that problem. They put the resonance down low, the low frequency. So they don't do that. So you don't generate all these weird peaks that aren't really there.
Yeah, or they get worse.
Yeah, it makes it worse. Yeah. So. Yeah.
We're going to invite you both back on Ribbon Mic Night. It's coming up in the near future. Also a big fan of putting a ribbon on it. And different ribbons have different flavors, for sure. But going back to the topic at hand, let's throw this one to Dave first. Dave Durr. Sorry about that. Which Dave, Roey?
Dave too.
No, you can
No,
do
you're Dave. You're Durr and Emmels. I'll get that straight.
Amos.
Amos. Dang it.
I don't know who said that.
Somebody who knows you well.
No, in Holland they say Amos, so
Uh-huh.
it's cool.
Is that where you're...
My dad was born there.
Oh, so you're actually pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah, so we'll let it.
We're good. So for Mr. Durr, what made you think there was room for another compressor in the market? And what drove you to create the one you're most well known for, which for me is the distressor and now the arouser?
It goes back to again some of those earlier wow moments, like when I was in the band and the guy pops on the room drum room compressor, and then we're working with John Patterson. After I got the 1176, my sound changed in my studio. It was it wasn't a subtle change either. I had a little teeny room, so using it on the drum, on the room mic on the drums, completely tied everything together. And I had one group, I remember, they came, they were in for quite a few weeks before I got the 1176. And then they tracked some more after I got the 1176. And they go, wow, you got a lot better since last time we were here. I was like, honestly, it's this one piece of gear. Yeah. Of course, I was working at Eventide at the time, and Richard, the owner, was always very generous, letting us use, I also let him use our studio to test in, so it was kind of a reciprocal thing. But I could take analyzers home and stuff, And I was curious. I'm like, what's going on inside this 1176? And I also got LA2A shortly after that, which also changed my vocal sound. But with the analyzer, it was interesting because the steady state, like you put 1 kilohertz through it, it really doesn't tell you anything. When you put
dynamic.
Yeah. When you put really low frequencies, the transformers do a thing. So it was very hard for me to tell why this unit did change my sound. And as it ends up, there was no schematics around for it. The internet hadn't really been invented. Al Gore hadn't put it out there yet. And I ended up reverse engineering it. This is marked R1, I start with the R1, and I was very, very bad at that, actually. Did you ever reverse engineer anything?
Yeah, so all of our stuff was done that way.
Yeah?
With and writing the mathematical models. That's how we modeled everything, based on the actual
For stuff you couldn't find schematics to, basically
Oh,
would reverse engineer.
you mean like going from the boards? Well, you put it on a photocopier and then flip it, so see the other side of the board.
I didn't even do that.
Oh, okay.
So and of course 1176 is relatively simple. I mean,
Those are
maybe
they're not bad.
50 components
Yeah.
or something. So, but still, it took a while. And one of the first things I saw was that because I did have schematics to some of my other newer compressors, they were all feed forward, which is a certain type of topology that was very.
Which compressors were those that you were doing the feed forward?
Well, the DBXs.
Oh yeah.
The Alesis, I had a JBL 7110, which was really a letdown. They're like, they hyped it that this was the next generation 1176, and it really was nothing like it.
You should probably, for people that don't know, feed forward versus feed back.
Yeah, I actually, if we get to that, I actually have a picture and stuff. But
Cool.
the difference, the older compressors, they didn't have these linear VCAs. They didn't have VCA that you put 1 volt in to the control and it goes up 10 dB. Another volt in goes up another 10 dB. None of that existed until relatively, what do you think, 70s?
Corporation is the one that really standardized it.
DBX.
DBX,
David
you're right.
Blackburn.
Yeah, because they used it for the
And actually, I think
VCAs and
Valley
consoles too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Valley people.
made little modules. So the older compressors, including the 1176 and LA2A, they didn't have access to that technology, anything that was that linear, So the way they made them somewhat predictable and musical was what you do is you take the output of the whole compressor and feed that back and actually control
Yeah, you compare that.
whatever the gain
Yeah.
element was. In the 1176, it was a FAT. In the LA28, it was an opto, both very nonlinear. So that was, when I saw that happening on the two boxes that changed my sound, I said, well, obviously I'm going to do a feedback compressor. And the 1176 was simple enough, and it had this distortion, this really smooth distortion that I, as a guitarist, you gotta have some distortion. So that was kind of how I started thinking about the design of the stressor. Was it's going to be feedback. I'm going to probably use a non-linear element, not one of these off-the-shelf VCAs, which really did make things easier in a way. But and then I eventually, I tried. I hope I'm not too far off the subject. I tried. Dave and I've had this conversation. Optocouplers. Actually made my own first, but then when I couldn't get two of them alike, I started going to
Never will.
Vactech, Solonix, all these companies that made these things for a living. No two were alike. And to this day, I say optocouplers are snowflakes. There are no two alike.
Yes.
So that narrowed it down because I wanted something reproducible, and so that it was. So that's kind of. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it was technical for those of us that are with you and understanding, but it did show that there was experience with something in the market that works great and had an amazing effect on your sound, yet you felt there was something missing. And that's what drove you to invent the distressor. And before we switch to Dave's answer, I remember clearly when you had the beta, the prototype, not even the beta, the prototype, and I knew you at that time from Eventide, you had helped me learn SIG file editing so I could make presets for the Eventide library. And we go way back. And you and Bob Belcher both taught me that, and that was great. And at that time, you said to me, hey, Roey, I'm thinking of making a compressor. And I was like, you fucking nuts. There's like 10.
He said he was making a direct box first.
I did that too.
True.
Yeah.
But the compressor, and I was like, there's a lot of compressors out there. It's going to cost a lot of money and stuff. And I said, but Dave, if you got something cool or different, sure, go for it. And I wasn't the only one. There was a bunch of other pals in your circle and professionals like Mr. Massenberg and other people that encouraged you and moved you forward on that. And it was great that you did it, because 32,000 later, and most of us have used it diligently since. I still have my originals without any British mods or anything. One of them has a dent in it from an assistant electric lady, and it's still working fine. So it wasn't only.
I want to back on there really, it was a weird time, and we got really lucky because really the world did not need another compressor in many ways. Gil, who I teamed up with, we worked at Eventide together, but right after Eventide, when I started working on the distressor, Gil said there's an AES in Europe, let's go there and try that out.
Nice.
Denmark.
Great.
And
NTP land.
yeah, it is. Besides being a great experience, just being in that country, my thought at the show was, we're never going to make it. I said, this place is filled with compressors. And I don't think I verbalized that to you, but I was walking around going, oh boy. I said, we're just a little teeny.
To dream the impossible dream.
Yeah, well, but I guess there was enough things different with it there.
There's definitely enough things different with it, and you put a lot of thought into it. And let's not forget that Gil is a master marketer, so he helped you do it too.
He is.
So, and moving back to the same question for you, Dave, regarding, for me, the Bomb Factory 76 and the Animod 670 would be the ones I would point to as great compressors that you designed that are totally in the mix today and still useful and still being produced. Of course, you don't own those companies anymore. But what made you think there was room for
It
another compressor?
goes back before that. So the Voce had a compressor called the EVC1 back in '95, and it was we went to AES that year, maybe it was '96 the AES, but it was one of 2 vacuum tube compressors that year, and nobody was doing that, and we did it in our little half rack units that we built the instruments in. It was tube. No, there's only about 50 or 100 made. It wasn't a lot. It was feed forward to opto, but super fast opto, because there was feed forward, shunt in series on the optical element, so super fast. You know, we could get it really fast with local feedback on the components, and it was like a very unique kind of compressor. It was just us and Summit. We're the only 2 tube compressor companies there, and everybody was asking, well, what is this based on? Is this an LA? I'm like, no, it's nothing to do with that. We're just trying to solve problem. You know, we want the euphonic, you know, the high fidelity audio path, all vacuum tube, and photocell is really a semiconductor. So don't let people fool you when they tell you it's just a resistor. It's not. You can't put more than 3 volts on those things without them really distorting. So that was the first one. Bomb Factory came along. So the whole genesis of that stuff was, I was looking at, you know, Bomb Factory Studio existed before that, which I wasn't a partner in. That was my partner Eric, but we decided to start this plugin company. I was out there doing some consulting work for Microsoft, which Eric was from Microsoft. And after that was done, he says, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, the guys from DigiDesign approached me years ago about doing TDM plugins, and, you know, about the Voce stuff, the Voce spin and stuff like that, and why don't you go up there and meet with them and see what they got to say? And I went there, and I had forgot my button-down collar shirt, and I was very upset, and I went to the meeting, and there were people barefoot. And I was just like, okay, and they couldn't answer any hard questions about numbers for marketing or anything like that. So I went back and I thought, I don't know. I mean, I guess we could do this. And that's how we started Bomb Factory. And
What year was that?
98, 99, something like that. And they said, so he showed me what people were using. I mean, I was still, you know, just tape, and, you know, we had Fairchild, we had everything. So I didn't need to do any digital recording. Yeah, we had everything there. We had great LA2As and Fairchilds and Altex and whatever, you name it. We had everything. Trident A-range console. And so I'm looking at it was ridiculous. The plugins at the time were like gray sliders, and with parameters that didn't make any sense. I said, well, why don't we give people things they understand, engineers understand, like, you know, these 2-knob compressors, they do the right thing. You don't need all these parameters. Why don't we just do that? And he said, I can make them look, you know, like that. And I said, well, I could, you know, I can model the circuitry, and it would do that, the same thing in the digital domain. And that's how we started all that with the compressors.
No small task. It seems easy for the way you tell it.
Well, because I think we're just approaching it from a different point of view. Like the people that were making plugins at the time weren't recording engineers, and they had no idea. They were computer guys. They're like, what is this? You know, they had names on sliders that made no sense. And I couldn't even tell what they did when I was using them. And I'm like, I don't understand. You just need 2 knobs, like input and output. And, you know, it'll do, because it works right here, right behind me is the thing that's working for us. Right. Why don't we just give people that? And that was the whole idea before, you know, for that stuff.
Not reinventing the wheel per se.
No,
just
digitizing. Let's give engineers the stuff that they're used to, the stuff that I'm used to, you know.
What was your first compressor plugin?
It was the hardest one, was the LA2A.
Oh, God.
And that took, just to model the optical cell took a month. And we used to work 7 days a week, 20 hours a day when we were really cranking. So, I mean, much younger, obviously, but it was, yeah, so, and after a month, we got it to the point where you put a piano, a complex program material through, and the peaks and the RMF, everything would come out exactly the same. You could subtract them and they'd be, pretty much identical. And so then we said, wow, we really have something now. And I remember when the interface was done, the GUI, we looked at it and we watched the real LA2A and the model one on the screen. The meters were doing like exactly the same thing. And everything like, this is really something. Well, we had never, nobody had ever seen anything like that at that point. Yeah, so it was
It's
really,
working.
yeah, well,
It's alive.
well, nobody had ever seen that in digital happening before. So that was really, we knew something was going on then.
And that was a hard one, man.
What's that?
That
Yeah, I know. And it's a lot of the stuff you could do straight up mathematical equations for, but some stuff is you have to treat like a black box and actually design tests to come up with the parameters.
That's a big
for
part of making a good compressor is having the right test.
Yeah.
Yes, we know.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's two things. There's trying to copy something, and then there's like understanding the problem. And so, like the way Voce started on the task initially. And then when I realized that people might want stuff that they're used to, and that's what the bomb factory stuff was. And we started the whole model of licensing and or, using stuff that had fallen into public domain technology / brands to make plugins, and that was the whole thing with that.
Very good. So that kind of takes to a question that you've sort of touched on a little bit, but I might as well ask it in case there's a different perspective. So since both of your products include emulations of original existing compressors in the marketplace, are there any stories you can share with us regarding trademark, copyrights, or lawsuits that were threatened?
Oh, yeah.
And in a similar question, did your experience with those existing compressors lead you to some kind of new feature or feature set in your device or software that you feel greatly differed than before, or contributed to the abilities of using the compressor in a way that didn't exist before? And what were those features? Now, both of you have kind of given us some of this information already, so you don't necessarily have to take my question and dwell on it too long, but please feel free to answer, because I think there's still probably some more dirt you can share with us on that subject. You don't have to name names, and you don't have to say anything that you don't feel comfortable telling us. But if there's any background stories or
The one thing I had, which is very ends up being a compliment to the company, when we started working on the distressor, there was, like I said, UA was not really producing the 11. I don't think they were doing anything.
No, they weren't. I think they intended to do software first, but it took them a few years to really get going.
And I know the company was always around, but so what happened was because there were two of the models of the compressors that really changed my life. I said we started in the manual saying you can get LA2A sound using the opto mode. You can get 1176 sound. Here's some basic settings, and so we mentioned the names of the products right in our manual. And several years later, when they were kind of back around and starting to do plugins and stuff, I became friends with them. Met one of my first real hangouts with them was at a tape op in New Orleans, which was really great. Lots of laughter. They were. I wish they could bring those back.
There's a lot of booze.
Yeah, and great food, spicy food.
That's right.
But schmoozing with those guys, everything, and I remember asking Gil. I said, Gil, I feel like we're putting up the manuals again and everything. I feel like I want to make sure it's okay that we mention their brands and their models. And they were like, the first guy I talked to, what's his name, said, let me check with, our legal department, et cetera, et cetera. And they came back, they were like, it's no problem. They were very, very nice
That's
about
good.
it. Yeah, they were very cool about it. And literally didn't cause us one minute of grief. No grief. So,
Well, I think they knew it would be hard to defend their trademarks because we had been using them right about the time that they trademarked, and we had products out long before they did. And they approached us and we said, that's tough, we're doing them. Take us to court, and they didn't. So they lost their,
yeah, if you don't want
they didn't try to do anything about it. So that didn't become an issue. And then we had, there's a long list for that question that I had.
Yeah.
Just because my partner was really litigious with this stuff. But we also had a run-in with Ivana, who's a dear friend now, but at the time there was an internet exchange, an email exchange between Eric and Ivana because she didn't want us to use variable mu. First of all, you shouldn't have been able to trademark variable mu. It's a technical term.
It is.
But the U.S. trademark department, they just let so much stuff go. Yeah, and Ivana, to her credit, didn't really understand the stuff, so she didn't know at the time. And, she was just taking us to task on it, and Eric sent this amazing email, which I will only summarize by, at the end, he called her a shiny Teutonic bitch, because there was she had herself in leather in a magazine ad at the time, and but she's great. Now it's all cool now, but back then it was pretty tense.
There's a lot of stuff like that too.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff with that.
People try to trademark something that's been around.
Yeah, it was that, and we just didn't cave to anybody. So the whole reason why, or some of the history between Animod, we got friendly with Greg from Pendulum because Havana sent him like a cease and desist because he was saying he had a variable mu compressor. He had one with 6386 tubes in it. And she said, you can't use that, and he stopped. He didn't do it, and so after he saw the whole thing with Eric, he sent a letter saying, I'm so glad you did that, because he really has no right to use that.
Live vicariously through your fight.
Yeah, and then, so that's how I met Greg, and that's how Animod started, my partner Greg from Animod.
You probably know this answer. Didn't, the Fairchild use a variable mu in their...
Yes, of course.
It's
in technical...
60s.
Oh, 50s, 40s.
Was it?
Yeah, it goes way back.
And
So-
then you have like Anthony DeMario. He
Yeah.
always used that term too.
Yeah, so but to her credit, she didn't know enough to know that, she was just trying to, like a mama bear, defend her trademark, which I understand. But anyway, it's all cool now.
No, incidentally,
Yeah.
I know a lot of people don't know how the laws work, but if you do trademark something, it's your job to go after
You have to
people that
defend
use
it, yeah. If you find out about it and you don't defend it, you lose the rights to it.
You do.
Yeah.
Not to mention that the States is one thing and every other place in the world is another thing. And it's
Yeah.
separate money and separate headaches, separate,
Yeah, it's
tracing and
international
filings. And
trademarks, yeah.
it's quite an undertaking.
It is.
I would like to just say something. First of all, Dave's made a lot of amazing software. Some of the first, I think that was the first classic compressors ever put out, plug-in, right?
Yeah, I don't know why people hadn't thought of it before then, but I think I just think people that were making them were computer guys and not studio guys,
Yeah, I think that's part of it. But with the trademark stuff, I am now on the other side. I am the guy that goes after people, and it's disturbing because I don't want to come off like a bad guy. But some of you have probably seen all the distressor clones out there.
Oh, yes.
And we trademarked a few things within that product. And when people start putting out, we even trademark the knobs. Those big white knobs are trademarked. That knob right there, which wasn't easy either, and cost thousands of dollars. But the idea is that it's unique and it's yours. It's part of your image, part of your brand, blah blah blah. But so I'm just kind of. We've had people come in. He's had more people come after him just because you were there before anybody else. But I am now on the other side, and it's not a comfortable position on either side.
We had trademarks as well and patents and stuff. So yeah, no, I understand that. I understand the whole IP thing, and it comes down to you needing a big legal budget to defend everything in the end. So
Yeah, you think it's like copyrighting a song. A lot of you who copyright songs or write songs. If someone steals your song, the Library of Congress who copyrights it is not going to go after the guy.
no,
You've got to do it. And like he said, if you don't do it,
you lose your rights.
yeah, if you let one guy go and then try to go after this other guy, the other guy can go, well, let that guy, you can get that guy. Yeah. So it's, I think the term is,
Oh yeah, that's right.
I can't either, I just feel
But
like
that is what it is, and
something, due diligence of something.
No, it's precedence of some kind. If you don't go after one, you have you set a precedence.
Right,
I'm
yeah.
not a lawyer, but it sounds like something like that.
Yeah, the concept is that, and like UA did not go after us for using 1176 and LA2A.
Yeah.
So I mean, it'd be hard for them not to, say. Well, they would have a hard case because I mean we would have fought it. We had money to fight this stuff, and because we had actual stuff in the market before they even bothered to try to copyright it. So then the copyright and then retroactively trying to go after us, and I wish they would. I mean, sure they would try to do that, but that didn't work. And of course, Ivana just was in the wrong on that, but all good.
Right.
So
Part of the art of
It's the ugly
Being
side of
gay.
the business.
it was
More
only ugly
the
for a
hard
minute, really. Yeah, it's all good later on.
Okay, well, that question was in the line of audio entrepreneurship, because I did promise that we were talking about both things tonight. So, in that question, I asked you guys if there was, in a similar fashion, was there something different, a feature set that you discovered or thought about and implemented into your device, and what was those features? For me, with the Arouser, you now have an incredible sidechain built in. Of course, every plugin generally has the ability to do sidechaining, but you took care of providing the tools to do the sidechaining correctly. And the mentality behind the distressor completely changed when the sidechain becomes available, because you can really just decide what you want to do with it. It's not just global compression; it's frequency conscious compression, which is amazing. And you didn't invent it. I'm not saying that, but the fact that you correlated and put it into as a feature makes your compressor quite unique. I can't think of too many compressors that have the control over the sidechain. They have sidechaining, but they do not have the control set that you've included. So that would be the example I would make for the Arouser as a feature set. So what led you to doing that? And similar question for you, Dave, although I don't have a specific feature set in your products to point to, but maybe you can think of one that makes it unique. The uniqueness is that you emulated things amazingly well.
We had, even the Voce compressor had sidechain insert. All of the plugins had the ability to do sidechain insert. Yeah. So we had, we always, I don't know, I thought it was kind of, you had that too, right? So I think it was kind of,
Yeah, it's always
thought of
been
at
there,
that
and so
time,
if you were an audio
well, of
engineer,
course,
you knew what
if
to
you
do
could
with
provide
it.
it, you would do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just because of de-essing and
Sure.
all the stuff where they do
All the frequency
different things
conscious.
with side chains, yeah.
So,
For me, it was just ease. To start with the distressor, the 1176 back in those days, they were just everything was huge. The parts, components were huge, the knobs were huge, the meter, and expensive. So for me, it was really, my goal was to make something more affordable, more consistent. That was a big deal. Consistent. We're much more consistent than most of those boxes I mentioned. And
That's
then,
where it started from, when you did the analysis of the original boxes and you saw those inconsistencies. That's
Yeah,
what
you see
led
it.
you to trying to make it more consistent.
and it was actually very easy. New technology makes stuff easier. We have ICs now that can switch signals around. In the old days, you had to have switches to switch stuff around. So just taking advantage of some new technology enabled us to bring quite a bunch of new features.
Digital control of the knobs.
Yeah.
Parameters.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, the side chain. We do have a relay in there to do the audio switching, but the detector side chain, that's all just very cheap ICs
Oh, yeah.
that switch it around, and they weren't available when the original product was out. So, take advantage of it.
And any feature set in one of your products, Dave, that you feel, makes it stand out differently, and what is that feature?
Well, the ATS-1,
Yeah.
I mean, that's all
Tape
a
sim.
feature set. Just being able to plug in different tape machine personalities and tape.
By the way,
formulation.
let me jump in. The ATS one was a really cool box that's emulated tape, and
In the analog
really,
domain.
did a really good job. But tell them about how you can different formulation.
Yeah, well, it came about, when I was doing Real Tape. Real Tape was a Bomb Factory product that Avid bought and put out as Real Tape, and the flanger and all the stuff based on that. So I realized years before, doing these plugins, I said, I could do this all in the analog domain, solve the same mathematical equations using analog computing techniques, multipliers and differentiators and integrators. I mean, because we're doing the same math, and I don't have to do the digital conversion. We can just do it in the analog domain. So a lot of people...
And Dave isn't telling you, but that is a very original.
Yeah, a lot of people
one.
had a hard time wrapping their heads around
Well,
that.
people still do, but it was
I know,
a
yes.
very original approach. Really
It was, and
It makes it sound like, oh, we did
Well,
this.
the only
No,
person
nobody else has done
who
it.
really got it at the time was Greg, who was from Bell Labs and did Pendulum, and he got it. And he said, you know what, we have to start a company. We have to do this, and so we started Animod. And he said the thing that will demonstrate all these different blocks, these analog computing blocks, would be your tape simulator. So we did the tape simulator as sort of a demonstration of how all this stuff would work. And it really worked. It sounded amazing. You could switch to 456 and hear the mid-range come out, even though the frequency response is the same, just due to distortion. All this is based on, I had a patent for a distortion where I could selectively generate any harmonic that you wanted, basically controlled through that. So that was part of it. It was, the whole, so we call it the Animod process, this process of using the mathematical approach of generating hardware. And it was successful. It worked well. We were successful from the first year. We made a profit. So
I'm still bummed I don't have some 670s before they stopped being made.
yeah, the 670s, they look great too, don't
Yes,
they?
they sound great. I did
They
get to use them quite a few times, but I never got
Oh.
to grab them for my set. So I'm keeping my eyes open. Okay, let's see. We will see if anybody in the audience has some good questions for you guys. So going back to the understanding of your creative minds, as musician engineers and audio engineers and designers. So let's say if EQ, equalization, or EQ choice is the timbre control of or the timbre control of our toolbox, or color in our paint box. What is compression in our audio toolbox? For each of you.
I had an analogy for this at one point.
The lighting.
timbre, well, dynamics. I mean, you know, it's timbre and dynamics,
Right.
right?
Those are the obvious ones.
Yeah,
Balance, I would say it has a lot to do with balance too.
yeah, it is. You know, there's kind of a, 500-pound gorilla in the room, and that is, why are we using compression so much these days? And it's not so much having to do with dynamics or trying to balance, the real reasons why you have it, but it's trying to fix the problems with digital audio and try to make digital audio palatable to people. And it's a Band-Aid, and I look around the AES trade, the trade show with the companies there, and I said, if we just fix the digital audio problem, probably 2/3 of these companies wouldn't be here. Yeah, it wouldn't be needed. Yeah, is what it is. So
You're
it's,
talking about time smear and issues with digital,
yes,
the
yes,
digital domain.
exactly. And so we try to hide it with compression, and it's the more things you add, and this is always the case. The more stuff you add to an audio chain, the worse stuff sounds, right?
Tell that to Tom Ronaldo.
Oh, I think I have, actually. Yeah, first put it into a digital recorder, a digital tape machine, and then put it through a lot of stuff. But I don't know about you, but I don't like the way that stuff sounds.
I'm all over the place on it. Some stuff I absolutely love, like
Yeah.
really super processed.
It's like you guys are reading my question in advance. But.
Well, go ahead and read it, and then answer it again.
No answer in retro.
Yeah, I mean, basically, the question I had in the vein of what you were just touching on, and we've touched on a little bit in other ways. So for you guys as musician engineers, do you believe compression is being used when you can hear it is heard in a recording, for the lack of a better term, is over-compressed as part of the sound, be it the individual instruments or the entire mix? Or rather, do you prefer compression that is used in a manner that is subtle and is more as if the dynamics were being controlled naturally by performance and faders, less limited, more open sounding in terms of dynamic response? Or perhaps a hybrid, which I think Dave was almost implying that, Mr. Derrick was implying that a hybrid might be good. And before you answer, I mean, having a lot of experience being Chris's assistant for many years, and having taught Tom about compressors and gates before he started working with the Cars the next week, I can offer some perspective. But besides the whole CLA TLA, just in general, I feel like there is an art form to overusing all these things and creating a sound and making a record that jumps off the page or makes people react because sonically it's different. But at the same time, it's distortion and overuse, and it's mangled. But there's an art form to it.
Well, do you know where this goes back?
Just as much as there's an art form to keeping it open and clean, like Al Schmidt does.
Do you know where this goes back to? Brian Wilson
There you go,
doing
pet
pet
shop.
sounds in the studio, where you're using the studio as an instrument or as a form of expression, which before that wasn't done so much. So from that point forward, everything is fair game.
Right.
So using, we look at the Raspberries in the 70s, the totally over-compressed drums productions, and it was the sound, that's what it sounded like. So there's no rules for any of this stuff, and you can use it for that. But I started using compressors not for that,
Not for coloration, but for
just
fixing.
just to fix stuff.
Right.
And it's turned into that, and I think it's become more prevalent because of people fighting the sound of digital, trying to reproduce what they're hearing, that they're trying. When you're recording acoustic, electronic stuff is a whole nother animal. That's a whole.
But when you're trying to make a natural sounding record, what is a natural sounding record? None of it's natural, but to make it be perceived as an acoustically human, natural experience and not colored by the equipment.
Very difficult in digital because it colors the sound so much, in my opinion.
I view you as a kind of a purist in a lot of ways. Like you like things natural. You don't want to hear things. And a good analogy, and everybody can probably relate to this at this point, was when you talk about fixing things. when, what's the pitch fixer?
Oh, yeah, auto-tune.
Yeah, when auto-tune, I guess they're the first ones, right? We, at Eventide, people used to take
Well,
harmonizers.
manually.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
yeah,
manually, okay, that
Yeah.
syllable's flat, and they would
Right.
literally re-record it and bring it
Yeah.
up.
We use
Well,
the AMS-DDL.
Yeah, the AMS DDL was the secret to my LaToya Jackson sound.
It was on an infernal machine, right, Elliot?
I didn't get a chance to use that either. But this goes right with what Dave was saying. That started out as
Well,
to
trying to get it to
fix
sound right.
in tune. They're
Yeah.
not singing in tune. They'll
Yeah.
put this on there, and then what was?
But did you ever like do it like a little too much, and you're like, it sounds kind of artificial?
Oh
You
yeah.
have to redo it.
Yeah, I did that for years, and I thought I was making a mistake. Then Cher's record came
Yes.
out, and I was like, what the hell was I thinking, fixing that all the time? I should have invented that.
Yes, exactly.
And there you go. You have
Not that I
Cher.
enjoyed listening to that effect, the way it was
But-
used
well,
by
I-
T-Pain and by others, but
Oh, well, yeah, I know, then it became,
de
anything
facto.
that becomes
It becomes the de facto sound.
I remember when I used to master records with George Horn out at Fantasy in the 80s. Did a lot of records up there. And I was lamenting the sound of noise-gated drums. And I was asking him, like, do you think this is going to stick around? Because this is really hard. And he agreed. He's like, nah, it's a fad. It's going to go away. And it did, luckily.
11 years later.
Yeah, 11 years later, but,
It's still here.
It still comes back anytime somebody wants that 80s
yeah, that
sound.
sound. But it's a sound of that time, and I
Right.
hated it.
But I mean, just
Non-linear reverb from Clark Technique and
Yes,
EMS.
the sound of the 80s.
And the
Sound of the 80s was,
But just like you said, I consider someone who just fixes things and doesn't really want to impart a whole new
as a purist.
sound as, more or less kind of a purist. But like you said, and that was the perfect example, the pitch fixing hadn't been around for the 70s. And then when they came out with the,
the automatic
Ataris,
Yeah.
they made it automatic, and so it made it easier. And what does Sharon creatively do? She goes, "Oh, I like that. I like how it jumps."
Yeah,
I
right.
like that.
Yeah.
And there you go.
It's either her or her producer, we'll never know, but it was.
That was her.
when we all,
They did it as a joke, and she came in and heard it
Ah,
and said, "I like this. Let's do this."
I remember the first time I heard it on the radio, I was like, I can't imagine how many hours I've spent de-glitching my harmonizer
I
to
don't
get
want
rid of that.
I know.
But it worked. It worked. It became
It sure did.
But I
Set
have to
a
try
trend.
to note to that stuff. So
Please.
the hardest thing is to get stuff to sound natural. It's really hard. If you take that route, you want it to sound like a live performance in the studio. It was easier years ago when you were recording the tape because it comes back off tape sounding like what went in the mic. Most tape machines, most consoles, not so much Neve and Studer, but the stuff that came before that sound, yeah, I know. Yeah, well, we're talking about group delay distortion, folks. Group delay distortion is your enemy in the studio.
And comb filtering.
Yeah, I mean, I worked with Henry Hirsch, who was Lenny Kravitz's producer and engineer, and that was always his quest to try to get the attack to sound right on the drums and everything. And it is hard. It's impossible with some equipment. You just cannot do it. Some microphones, some consoles, some tape machines. You can't do
So it is the ears and not the gear, but some of the gear really is important for the ears to know how to use to get the
But
sound
it's
the
not the
ears want to
vintage.
get.
It's not
So
the
it's a-
vintage of the gear. It's not using old gear
No.
versus it's whatever works for it. And that's the big story.
And another person who I consider kind of a purist, and yet always was on the cutting edge of audio processing and recording was George Lassen. George uses everything, but he, kind of like you, he doesn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
He wants stuff to be natural. And one of the big things with compression, as you guys all know by this point, is making things sound bigger and more in your face. It tends to bring up stuff. And in the 80s, that was the name of the game. But George, I think, too, is a purist. And I can imagine that he, in fact, he's told me, he doesn't like a lot of the super compressed stuff that's going on now. He's, you know, he can do that, as his words are, he chooses not to. But again, you know, talk about high fidelity.
Well, he's doing bluegrass, so it pushed him off into that. He
Yeah,
could do
yeah.
stuff that's really pure. I have another story, right, is talking about that, is smoke, you know, the head of Motown. So Bob Olson, who worked at Motown, you guys know Bob Olson? He told me stories about, you know, they had to do stuff that didn't sound compressed, or else Barry Gordy wouldn't approve it. He would hear compression, like the slightest bit. So they used to do the super channel stuff with the mixing in the original signal, so you wouldn't hear the compression so much, and that's how they had to do the records, just so, because it bothered him so much compression. Yeah, really, he could hear like any compression they put on records. That's why the Motown stuff, it sounds big and full, but you don't hear any compressing artifacts on that stuff. They had to go way out of their way to satisfy Barry Gordy on that stuff.
Interesting. Huh?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a good story.
I have to
It
ask
really
Bob
is.
about that.
Yeah, please. Yeah, yeah, you should.
You know, a lot of people, too, musicians, and you guys, anybody that's recorded, some musicians are very sensitive to dynamics, and stuff will really bother them. Singers especially, if they sing loud and the compressor clamps it
Well,
down.
if you hear it doing it, yeah.
Yeah, that'll really bother them. Even though it might sound natural to you in the room, they hear it in their head. And one of the, not too long ago, I had experience with Bela Flack Band, incredible banjo player. And his thing was, we made this little direct box with a compressor, and was trying to get his sound guy interested in it, and he goes, oh, no, Bela doesn't like compression. I go, really? Because in my head, banjos are clink,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, really weird sounds when I play. But you know, he said, no, his words were, I'll play it the volume of one. But what they do is the trick with a little reverb, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah. Reverb smooths that stuff out. I mean, that was my first, you know, how to fix stuff before compressors. And then I found out about compressors. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna use these two. Still used a lot of reverb though.
Yeah.
I'd have to say that what you said applies actually to hip hop too. There's been times where I would take a mix, and this is in the older days, because nowadays I always want to hear the 2-track, and otherwise I won't know about the demolitis that the parties involved are suffering from. And if I hand in something that I'm hearing and it's completely devoid of the demo, I get a lot of "what did you do" kind of response. Whereas in the old days it used to be like, "Thank goodness you hooked that up." So, but even back then, I would say that a lot of the hip hop producers would notice right away if I had compressed something or done something with the compressor to the drums, and would usually not like it and usually it had to do with the noise and the grime after the sample. It'd be like some stuff that, you know, was not as prevalent. Like, what'd you do to my, you know, sound in the hi-hat? And I'm like, oh, you want that?
Yeah.
So, you know, because I was treating it more from a musician purist format, but I was a fast learner. I have plenty of hip hop credits, so I knew what they were looking
You
for.
didn't use compression.
I'd have to say no, I did, but
Dial
I
it
did it
back.
in a different
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
I got much more into parallel compression, and I would use it as a sonic tool, but not make it as quite as noticeable. And the same thing with gates. I mean, they would literally freak out at me for cleaning everything up, because I would get it so clean. They'd be like, "What'd you do?"
Yeah, it
Oh,
starts
well,
to-
hold on. Store this. Let me store this, because I know they're going to make me go back and store the recall. Okay, now let me open it all up for you. Oh yeah, there it is. That's what I want. Okay, cool. So just relating it. It's not only the singers and the compressors. Guitar players and bass players are very responsive to a tube, whether it be in the DI or whether it be in the amp. It changes their whole playing style. Some of them realize it and some of them don't. And when they do realize it, it's a good thing, because they're much better players. They're much better players when they realize the tube has given them, a lot of the je ne sais quoi. So, okay, so just back a little bit to entrepreneurial, and then we'll open it up. Can you just share a little bit about, it doesn't have to be specifically about the music business, but in general, about doing a business, and in our case, it does a little bit have to do about music, I'm sorry. The fact that the ever-changing landscape of the platform and operating system updates and the changes in manufacturing standards worldwide, ROH if I've got it right, UL and CE obviously, international trademark issues, patents, etc., etc. Is there any stuff you want to share just a little bit more? Although some might be bored by this, some might be starting a new business and find it interesting. Some might have always been curious how someone starts from nothing and turns it into an industry standard product. So I don't know, just anything about the various steps in running a business. I know Dave has a big beef about the lead problems that ROH, is that the name of the?
Rojas.
Rojas.
ROHS.
They set up rules in Europe that, completely concocted the operations for a lot of people, because all of a sudden they had to worry about little bits of materials in their system that will never be in a landfill, because who is throwing out a distressor? Who's throwing out an LA2A? But anyway, it became an issue. And so as an example, can you talk about some of the steps you've had in running a business and experiences you had? You can keep it relatively short, but just some background that might be interesting to some of us. Me personally, I'm starting a business.
Well, I don't have much about that part.
Yeah, I would say, starting a business, the first thing anybody who's done it will tell you is be willing to sacrifice your personal life. You can't really start your own business. I mean, people have gotten lucky, but generally, you got to go all in. You got to sacrifice a whole lot of your hours and time and sleep. I've been relatively lucky in a lot of ways, but if you start a business, and maybe you know this too, a lot of you guys have already been through it. I see faces in here that have been through this. You just got to really be ready to put everything into it, because it is a very competitive world out there. As far as the Rojas, you guys all know about the exit from Britain wants to do from the Eurozone. And from my perspective, I can actually understand it, because what happens is designed by committee.
Yeah. It's interesting now with those rules, they've exempted their auto industry,
Medical,
and medical, aerospace.
where it really
industries.
matters.
Yeah, I know, because it would have, okay. So the problem is, without lead in the solder, you grow tin whiskers. The lead suppresses there's tin lead. The lead suppresses the tin whisker growth, which shorts out these tiny little pads, between traces on an IC, and it causes failures left and right. So we've been kind of stuck with that. I won't tell you how we got around that, but yeah, I know Dave suffered with this.
Yeah, it's cost us millions. But like I said, there's good regulations and there's bad regulations, and I know that England is divided because they have to, when they became a member of the whole union, you have this big design of rules and laws and approaches by these giant committees.
Yeah.
One of the problems is they want to make one rule fits all. And
Well, they did about, yeah, but not to play devil's advocate, I was there before they were fully integrated into the EU, and their big beef was that they couldn't call Cadbury chocolate anymore because it didn't have enough cocoa in it to call it chocolate, and that was their big beef with it. Oh, we're not going to be able to call Cadbury chocolate anymore. I mean, come on, guys. Let's just say, it's not chocolate.
And
It's
hence
just
Brexit.
Yeah, hence Brexit. So whatever.
but anyway, yeah,
The rose stuff is.
you do have to
yeah.
play games because you have to meet requirements and safety stuff, and some of it is very good, and then I'd say it's 50-50, there's a lot of stuff that's...
I'm talking about regulations, so manufacturing here, we don't need FCC. We don't need UL except for in LA County and Chicago City,
Yeah, that's
places
true.
like that. So, you know, we get away with not needing any of that stuff.
That's true.
The first Voce products used to wipe out FM reception in a whole building when you turned them on. 'Cause that was the day of that stuff.
ITV.
Yeah, but and it was before CE, so we sold a lot of stuff in Europe. Yeah, I don't know. It's the Rose stuff shouldn't apply to pro audio gear because people don't throw it out on the curb like they do their computer monitors, and
No.
it doesn't become obsolete.
And just as an example, I know we've really kind of taken your more general question advice for entrepreneurs, but just an example, we wired from day one. We used Teflon wire. Teflon coated wire won't melt,
No.
and to chop through it takes effort. So it's more expensive. It's very reliable. We use silver wire inside, really good stuff. Well, when we had to comply with the ROHS rules, which are continually evolving, one of the things was you've got to suspend your wires. They can't touch anything around it because they might short or damage. And I'm saying these wires are never going to short. You can hold a match under them for ever. So that kind of stuff makes you angry and costs you a lot of money. And the thing that really screwed us up was failures. When they first, people put lead in solder for a very good reason.
Suppresses the tin, bro.
Not only that, but I mean it's malleable, so it doesn't break. And they use it inside the ICs themselves. We've literally had probably 10,000 ICs fail after
Since they changed it.
Yeah, they took out the lead and ICs. I don't know if thermal going up and down in temperature. Anyway, it's one thing to ask you to fasten your wires down, but it's another thing when it causes failures.
Industry issues.
Yeah,
It's a problem
and,
manufacturer.
But just if I may, if you people that want to go into the business, first of all, it's a lot of fun. It's always very exciting. Just be willing to sacrifice a lot in your life. Make sure if you're in a relationship that person is willing to sacrifice. Yeah, sacrifice too.
I didn't become a dad till age 50, so that's
You did good. You did good.
had to wait that long to get everything in order.
One of your best products.
Yes,
Yeah,
myself. That is my best.
Is it? But it could pay off, obviously. But just
And on the same subject, the ever-changing operating systems and upgrades that, us as users are driven crazy by it too if we want to stay current with the files coming in and out to a certain extent, because obviously the platform has been very forgiving since Pro Tools 10 allows reverse compatibility. But with that being said, went from 32-bit to 64-bit. I'm sure that drove you guys bananas. And of course, because you have in-house talent to solve these issues, maybe it wasn't as bad for you as other companies that are using third-party programs.
That's what drove us out of business, basically, because it's we sold
Bomb Factory?
we sold Bomb Factory because every year DigiDesign would break all the plugins. So it wasn't like we had a product. You can't think of these plugins as a product. It was a service business. So that's what the model turned into. It's just like never-ending changing everything. So it just was really, I think, unsustainable.
Apple does it to Abbott and Abbott does it to the users.
Yeah.
price of progress.
Okay. So one other thing now that I wanted to ask before we open it up, and this goes right to Dave Amels, or Amels, however you want to pronounce it. You've invented and programmed an artificial intelligence DJ, which is used on a local radio station. In fact, more than one, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's WFMU.
WFMU, and it's a pretty amazing thing. When Dave first showed me it about a year and a half ago, I listened to it pretty often, and I would call in the request line and got off on the fact that the DJ would say my name and play my record eventually, like within 20-30 minutes. And of course, Dave has a very cool, eclectic taste of music, and the DJ definitely has his genetic background in its choice making. So I don't know if you could just tell us a little bit about that. I know it draws on a couple of your skill sets that you've used over the years, but what inspired you? What's cool about it? What does it run on? Is it something you're going to make commercially available? Or?
Probably not, but no. I had some health issues a couple years ago, so I started creating this thing that would, like, for my daughter, really. In case I wasn't around, it would be me,
Music.
It would remember, the voice and stuff like that. So that's where it all came about. And it's, it's kind of like
That's touching, dude.
some of the
Very
background behind that. And it just evolved into this crazy thing. And the overnight show is really crazy. It's an English woman DJ.
Yes.
And it's pretty trippy. It's all that's all late 60s, like late night type music stuff. And that's
Great stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and people are really engaged and into it because it's interactive on the chat board. The overnight show creates poetry to link the music.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I love that.
It posts it on Twitter simultaneously.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, it's on Twitter, and I'm going to
wow.
extend it to Instagram and Facebook, so it's all like...
Sounds like a tool that every audio manufacturer would want to have a subscription to take care of like 10 of the things that they have to take care of, not to remove anybody's job like Nicole, who does it for Gil, but having that could certainly be, I know for me it would be a huge time saver if I could say, this is what I'm working on now, go, and then it took care of all the extra stuff.
That's the thing, is trying
Tax
to...
support.
This is only
Tech support.
so many hours in a day, so
Right.
you need to do that. Well, my AI experience came from I don't know, about 5 years ago, we were doing a project for the new type of VDSL, because in some parts of the world it's still important, like super high speed, and we used machine learning to decode the data coming through. And I saw this as a really valuable tool, and it works. I mean, the stuff works really well. Well, it's transparent in our everyday life, and Google or anything you do, it's using all that, and the stuff works really well. So I just extended it to entertainment, basically.
But the coding and the tools you use are all proprietary. You're not using like AWS's module for this and Google's module for that. It's all proprietary code that you created.
Unfortunately, it's written in the only non-deployable language, or one of the few non-deployable languages, which is MATLAB, if people are familiar with that.
You wrote that in MATLAB?
It's all in MATLAB. It's running live in MATLAB. Yeah, I know. I think they should give me a free
License.
license
Have
for
you
that.
approached them?
No, they're weird. So, but anyway, that was, it runs it, which means I can't put it up in the cloud, and I really want to. So I have to in my spare time, I will rewrite it. I don't know when that's going to happen, but,
Well, it works really well now for those of you that want to tune in.
yeah. It's on WFMU, it's the Night Owl show it's on the Ichiban stream, so it has done the FM stream,
Mm-hmm.
but I had to go sit in the control room.
To babysit.
Yeah, because
case
the
it's spit up.
FCC requires
Right.
that, so I was like, it's not saving me any time.
Right.
So we had a
I
little
might
bit
as well
of
just
party.
DJ it.
Yeah, we brought drinks and just had a party.
Babysat the DJ.
Yeah, so we babysat the AI, but it's on.
Thank God it didn't drink.
Yeah. So it's on the Ichiban stream on WFMU, and it's the Night Owl, and on Sundays is the Ichi Bunny, which is a different thing. It's more like AM radio type stuff. That's on 3 to 4 on Sundays, and Monday through Friday, midnight till 4 a.m. is the Night Owl, which is the more trippy stuff.
Cool. Well, eventually we're going to have content from tonight, and we'll try to include a link to it, although we don't want to
Okay.
explode your servers.
No,
It's
we'll
all
put it
good.
on the FMU one.
Right.
He's talking about, there's a test stream that we run like 24/7 pretty much.
Okay.
He's been
We'll
part
keep
of
it.
that.
We'll keep it on the.
It's not really
the public
licensed for
open.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But on FMU you can listen to it, and you can go on the chat board, or you can call on the phone. There's a phone number you can talk to it and ask for stuff. And
Make requests.
Yeah, which you've done, right,
Yeah.
on the phone?
Mm-hmm.
And put your voice on. And
Put my
your phone
voice
call
on and it
everything.
played the song I wanted, which
Yeah.
I didn't try and choose something out of genre.
Yeah, we just say
But,
play something by the Beatles or something.
No, I forget what it was, but
I hope it was something a little
it was
challenging.
It was, but it was in the period of time.
Yeah.
I don't actually remember right now, but I said I bet she's got this, and I
Yeah,
threw that out there.
but I'm hoping to extend that sort of stuff to
Search the web.
Well, no, I have a friend who does computational fluid dynamics, and which is stuff for fusion and like helicopter. You know, you see the little swirly diagrams of the. So I think there's a way to not be using differential equations in discrete time to solve that stuff, where we can do it with machine learning. Hoping to do that next. We'll see what happens.
Very promising and cool. Cool new products in the future from both of you. Dave, I know you like to take that slow, but I have a feeling you have something working somewhere. We don't know when, but we know it will happen. Don't worry, Gil. Say, this is what I'm working on now. Go! And then it took care of all the extra stuff.
That's the thing, is trying to, this is only
Tech support.
so many hours in a day, so
Right.
you need to do that. Well, my AI experience came from like, I don't know, about 5 years ago, we were doing a project for the new type of VDSL, because in some parts of the world it's still important, like super high speed, and we used machine learning to decode the data coming through. And I saw this as a really valuable tool, and it works. I mean, the stuff works really well. While it's transparent in our everyday life, and Google or anything you do, it's using all that, and the stuff works really well. So I just extended it to entertainment, basically.
But the coding and the tools you use are all proprietary. You're not using like AWS's module for this and Google's module for that. It's all proprietary code.
Unfortunately, it's written in the only non-deployable language, or one of the few non-deployable languages, which is MATLAB. If people are familiar with that.
You wrote that in MATLAB?
It's all in MATLAB. It's running live in MATLAB. Yeah, I know. I think they should give me a free
License.
for that. No, they're weird. So, but anyway, yeah, that was, so yeah, it runs it, which means I can't put it up in the cloud, and I really want to. So I have to in my spare time, I will rewrite it. I don't know when that's going to happen, but,
Well, it works really well now for those of you that want to tune in.
yeah. It's well, on WFMU, it's the Night Owl show, it's on the Ichiban stream, so it's not on, it has done the FM stream, but I had to go sit in the control room.
To babysit.
Yeah, because the MCC requires that, so it's like, it's not saving me any time.
Right.
So we had a
You
little
might
bit
as well
of a
just
party.
DJ.
Nah, we brought drinks and, just had a party.
Babysat the DJ.
Yeah, so we babysat the AI. But it's on...
Thank God I didn't drink.
Yeah. So it's on the Ichiban stream on WFMU, and it's the Night Owl, and on Sundays is the Ichi Bunny, which is a different thing. It's more like AM radio type stuff. That's on 3 to 4 on Sundays, and Monday through Friday, midnight till 4 a.m. is the Night Owl, which is the more trippy stuff.
Cool. Well, eventually we're going to have content from tonight, and we'll try to include a link to it, although we don't want to
Okay.
explode your servers.
No,
It's
we'll
all
put it
good.
on the FMU one.
Right.
He's talking about, there's a test stream that we run like 24/7 pretty much.
Okay.
He's been
We'll
part
keep
of
it.
that.
We'll keep it on the.
It's not really
the public.
licensed for
Okay.
that, yeah.
Right. Gotcha.
But on FMU you can listen to it. And you can go on the chat board and or you can call on the phone. There's a phone number, you can talk to it and ask for stuff.
Make requests.
Which you've done, right, on the phone?
Mm-hmm.
And put your voice on. And
Put my voice on, and it played the song I wanted, which
Yeah.
I didn't try and choose something out of genre.
Yeah, we just say
But,
play something by the Beatles or something.
No, I forget what it was, but
I hope it was something
it was
challenging.
It was, but it was in the period of time.
Yeah.
I don't actually remember right now, but I said I bet she's got this, and I
Yeah,
threw that out there.
but I'm hoping to extend that sort of stuff to
Search the web.
Well, no, I have a friend who does computational fluid dynamics, and which is stuff for fusion and like helicopter. You know, you see little swirly diagrams of the. So I think there's a way to not be using differential equations in discrete time to solve that stuff, where we could do it with machine learning. Hoping to do that next. We'll see what happens.
Very promising and cool. Cool new products in the future from both of you. Dave, I know you like to take that slow, but I have a feeling you have something working somewhere. We don't know when, but we know it will happen. Don't worry, Bill. So, thank you both. And at this point, if we'll have anyone who has any questions, if you do, please come up, stand over here. I'll give you the mic. You can ask the question. If not, that's okay too.
You have to actually come up here.
Or you could shout it out.
With the wireless mic?
Shout out. Oscar Brown was not only a great classical and jazz musician and composer, has been involved with product development for many, many years. So, Oscar, what would you like to ask?
I have a student that I teach online in California, and he's a young composer, and he says, you know, to me, he says, like, it sounds like all these, you know, he has a ton of sound libraries that he uses, some of them with orchestra. And he says, everything sounds like it's heavily compressed, you know.
The sample libraries itself.
Yeah,
themselves.
and I said, they are.
Yeah.
You know, they're recorded, you know, real instruments recorded in the studio, they're compressed. And he asked me, and I thought, well, the question tonight, is there any way he could uncompress, you know, you can do something to make the instruments sound like they're not so compressed.
Not unlike DBX encoding and decoding, some
Yeah.
kind of a decoding compression, expansion.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can just put expansion on it, I guess. But my question is, why does he use it? Why doesn't he just use real instruments?
Well, we're talking about orchestral stuff. They have to first create the.
He doesn't have 50,000.
They don't have an orchestra at their disposal. I mean, you can go to Prague eventually and get it recorded,
Well, you know, I think what he's concerned about is the resonance, because, you know, the more you compress an instrument, the more you lose.
But is he just using it for reference to hear where this
but he would
composition
use it for real if it
No,
sounded
I think
good.
he's using it for real.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
Well, it's something for East West and those other companies to consider doing the sounds dynamically without the processing and have the processing be available in the playback plugin. And those processes be the distressor
And I think that
Bomb Factory.
since we're seeing more and more of that,
I don't know any way to get that stuff to sound right, because samples are just a snapshot of something. It's like,
They are.
imagine if you reconstructed something just from photographs. And
Yeah.
that's all it is. It's not, so like Voce, we never did that. It was models at least. The models at least take every step in velocity change. The models at least take every step in velocity change the timbre, you know, what it was doing. Samples were just, you know, that's just a snapshot. That only happened one time, and it happens over and over every time you do it. It just, you know, that
Well-
doesn't remind me of anything having to do with the real world.
I told him, you know, I had a really interesting question, because all the young composers that I hear, they very rarely use any melody. It's all like fanfare, almost. You know, if you notice, if you listen to the score, there's no character-driven anything,
Ah, interesting.
you know? And it's almost near impossible to do it using a sound library. The more you try to do something like that, the more you can tell that it's not a real instrument,
Oh, yeah.
you know?
Definitely. I mean, it's great for getting an idea of what your composition sounds like. I'm all for that, using it for tools for writing and composition.
There's a lot of people out there, though, that
I know.
have great
They just
libraries,
do it that
and,
way now. I know.
and you could never know it wasn't a real
I
one.
would recommend that he gets, your friend gets C4 or C6 and uses it in the expansion modes and try to reverse compress.
Oh,
Yeah,
I think the best way to
It
do
won't
it
solve the problem.
would it be.
I see that look in Chuck's face. It won't solve that problem, but it will definitely help with the over-squashed sound of it. So, not to jump from that question, but Joe Berger, a phenomenal guitar player, indicated he wants to ask something.
Yes.
And also
I don't know
engineer.
how well related this is to compression or this whole evening, but when you started saying rules and regulations, it comes to mind that you can listen to a whole lot of different CDs, and all of a sudden, or digital products, MP3s, whatever. All of a sudden, somebody comes across with one that's about 10 dB louder than anything you've ever heard, and it's still clean. How do they get away with this? And it's kind of like television commercials that are louder than the program. Isn't there a master limiter preventing that?
No.
Should there be? And I know a lot of people
Well,
are
to a
upset by
certain
the fact
extent with streaming,
I
they set
think make
levels.
their record as loud as that person who got away with the 8 or 10 dB extra clean. Now, what box makes that happen?
Oh, makes it loud like that?
Does
Well,
it actually trick the converter at the end of the day? It's
No.
not games. You can't put that
No,
much
no, it's not, it's management of peaks.
gain. Right.
And,
No, but even that, you can only go so loud inside the
Yeah.
software, and that's as loud as it comes out. These people are getting away with something else. And a friend of mine, Steve Remote, suggested that it's tricking the actual playback thing into thinking it's a different level.
Okay,
And it really
MP3s
is, like +4 is now +10.
MP3s do have a volume level embedded in the MP3, like a master.
So whatever box they're using, whatever they're doing to get away with this much louder clean thing, everybody now wants it.
Yeah.
They come to you for mastering because they want their thing 10 dB louder than they were able to mix it. And that's the wrong reason to come for mastering. I turned down every one of those.
Yes.
For me, dynamics counts
that's-
more.
Yes.
And you don't have to turn your stereo only to 3 to get your maximum volume.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, so it's
It's
like
been that
for
way
me,
for a long time. People,
but
you
this
know,
is
loud
happening a
stuff.
lot, and it bothers me. I don't know. Maybe
They
it
just
doesn't bother
implemented
me.
a whole system.
You know, with all the streaming services have now set their operating levels to LUFS at -16 as an
That's
average,
right.
and a couple other ones -13. And at first, I was driving myself crazy, like, oh, I gotta print the CD version at the volume I used to print, and then I gotta print the lower volumes for, you know, I gotta make sure it
Yeah.
sounds good. Eventually, I'm sorry, but I was like, no, I'm just doing my version, and whatever the fuck it does, because this is absurd. And for me personally, the way I ever got my most extreme volumes, which most people don't want that now because of this LUFS issue, so I just do a good volume, is to get the most I could out of my DAW and then go into my Manleys. And my Manleys would give me the room and the space way up more than you would think is possible.
What's the secret box that allows them such a higher level, still clean?
There's
It
no
doesn't
one.
break up.
Yeah,
I mean, there's no
bunch.
one, the old NTP compressors and limiters are great for that, yeah.
There's nothing I can make come out of Pro Tools or Logic will do that.
Oh, you can do it.
I know you can, I mean, I
But
have.
you don't want to, right?
Yeah, but it breaks up, it doesn't stay clean, and these people's stuff somehow stays clean.
You put a series of a compressor and then some EQ, another compressor, some more EQ, another compressor.
I
Each
tried
one
it.
just does a little bit.
Right, because instead of overworking one process, you get multiple processes going on.
You have to do it
might not be
in a non-causal way where you can, you know, look at the whole file.
And obviously
Do
the
stuff ahead
program,
of time.
obviously the program material matters. If it's
Oh, yeah.
a zillion, you know, transients and high frequency sounds going up and down, it's going
Program
to be one
materials
thing, and
everything.
warm and smooth, then it's going to be another thing.
Mhm.
But Joe, you know this, so I know you're asking for the benefit
No, I mean,
of
I
everybody
know
else.
because I'm hearing these products that I can't achieve the same level no matter
Come
what
visit
trigger
did
you
you-
Come visit me in the Lower East Side, and we'll
Yeah, I was
experiment.
gonna say, did you
I'll
load,
come down there and see what you got.
did you load them in and see what the actual, like, the RMS was of these things that you were
Yeah.
talking about? You gotta, like, you know,
Meter.
load them in and
Yeah,
actually
meter.
take a look at what's going on.
Meter it and see what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere I
Not unlike
find
Dave,
the
where he
actual
analyzed
examples.
the LA3 and the LA2 with the spectrum and analysis. It's a similar kind of reverse engineering.
Did you think they maybe take the file, like adjust that volume parameter in the file?
Once a client
Yeah, but if
gets
you
one of
load it
those,
in-
they
if
never
you-
go back to the
If you
real
load it
world.
into an editor, it doesn't matter, right? You're gonna see what's actually going on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's regardless of, you know, if they have a volume
There's plugins that will
parameter.
do that all in one place, by the way. I mean, you can get a Waze plugin and then crunch all the peaks right down into everything else. And it'll be loud.
You can do, based on my distortion plugin, I made a non-causal peak limiter that will do, and it's funny, it's for only third harmonic distortion, you can do 9.5 dB. Why is it 9.5 dB? Because if you take the 20 log 1/3, it's
Right.
half dB. So if you want to take the fifth, you can do like 12 or
Exactly.
14 dB or something like that. And so you only add that distortion, and that stuff works great. And you can do stuff like that all day long.
Analog tape is
But
Yeah,
it
there's
really
some
Did
of
it for us to an extent naturally.
Yeah, yes and no.
you scrunch it down and then you turn it up.
Yeah, but it's not.
There's that, but this is something else. I'm
It's
not
something
sure
else,
what it
yeah,
is.
I
I've
know.
done a lot of that.
I think it's something like that.
It's something else that they're
non-causal.
doing. I'm not
people
sure what it is yet.
Yeah.
You might have a handle on it.
Well, I think I have those tools, not that I use them often, but I have them in my isotope. And
Yeah, I'm still using like 70s audio gear and stuff, so it's like, I'm still on my omnipresser and all that kind of
Well,
stuff.
yeah.
Oh, you know me, I got the
1176.
cleanest pair of
Yeah, you got
omnipressors
a
in
pair of them
Manhattan.
working perfect.
Which Gil still can't believe how much I paid for them originally, but now he's like, oh, that was a good
You
buy.
remember the Compex,
Sure.
what was it, the vocal stressor?
Yes.
A wonderful sidechain dynamics EQ piece
Michael Brown.
from like
knows
the
that.
early 70s somewhere. It was a great piece. You could, but for me, it was the beginning of compressors you can really hear, as opposed to compressors that are invisible. You know?
That goes into the question I was asking about EQ and compression and whether it's a timbre or.
Right. There's some people.
Some
like
compression
you can
falls
hear.
into the EQ land.
You know,
in the
there's
color,
this
in the color
techno
wars.
stuff where there's so much compression it's coming out backwards.
Omnipressor does that for sure.
But it's
Yeah.
like a new
That's a
kind of
feed
backwards.
forward, right? That's feed forward. Yeah.
It's like all exhaled kind of.
Yeah, that's how you can do that with that.
I tell you, when you clean it out and get all the critters out of it, it's an incredible compressor.
Oh, I bet,
Yeah,
Can't
it's a
believe it.
great unit. I love it. I've been on it since '75. So.
Anybody else have a question for the Davies?